Hello again, this is Nick Schrammick and Howard Chao, founders of Doon Insights, with our podcast, What's Next In? And today we're focusing again on legal tech with an interview with the founder of Streamline.ai, or formerly known as Legal Desk. So Howard recently had a chance to interview Kathy Zhu, the founder of Streamline.ai, about what she's building. Howard, what did you find interesting about that conversation?
Well, as you will see, Kathy is a particularly charismatic and also passionate founder. She believes strongly in the concept that she's building, which is how to manage the workflows of lawyers. And she has personal experience in this area, obviously, because she's been a lawyer for several years. And she also was an in-house GC where companies face these problems every day. So I think she has some very interesting concepts, and I think it's an interesting startup to take a look at.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and get right into the interview between Kathy Zhu and Howard of Streamline AI.
Kathy is a former Wilson lawyer, and it so happens that David Wang is with us, our old friend from Wilson Sonsini, and he will be my co-interviewer today. So before we get into the company, let me ask David to do a quick self-introduction for those few people in the legal industry that don't know him. He's such a well-known figure.
Thank you, Howard. I'm David. I'm Chief Innovation Officer for Wilson Sonsini, corporate practitioner before that, created the function in Wilson, and we've kind of become a well-known player in this space over the years that I've led the function. So I'm in charge of our technology strategy, our product, as well as partnerships within the ecosystem. That's how, Kathy and I got to know each other, and this is a very interesting company. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. So I know you look at a lot of startups and new technologies, David, so I'm sure you'll be able to give us some insights into this space. So Kathy, we're going to start by asking you to give your origin story of the company as well as a little background on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Howard. And thanks, David. So exciting to be here. So those two things really kind of just dovetail on each other, Howard, because I've been an attorney, as you kind of and David mentioned, for the past 10 years, starting my career at Wilson Sonsini as a corporate associate. I did not cross paths with David at that time. We met up later, but it was fantastic training and got to work on some really exciting transactions while I was there. And then I left, and first I joined Medallia on their commercial legal team, really learning kind of the ins and outs and the intricacies of negotiating complex SaaS deals. Learned a lot, and then was ready for my next big challenge after 4 years. And that was DoorDash. So I joined DoorDash shortly after they just closed on their Series D. I think they raised like $500 million. It was 2018. And they hired me as their first commercial lawyer to really build out that whole function for the global business. But starting on day one, I was the only person at the entire company working on all of their contracts. And I'm talking about huge sales deals, right, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, all the way down to the itty bitty, like tiny vendor contracts, the guy that's going to come in to fix the air conditioning and like even NDAs, everything. So we're talking about hundreds of requests every single week. And the biggest pain point that I experienced right from the very start was I didn't have a system that could actually manage all of these Slack messages and requests coming in through email, completely piecemeal. And I needed something that could centralize all of that into one place. And, without it, it was just complete chaos, right? And I also needed a system that could surface really key metrics. So I could plan and figure out how many people I needed to hire, how to substantiate that headcount. Long story short, I couldn't find that technology anywhere. Based on my experience at Medallia, I already knew that generic tools like your Jiras and Asanas were not going to work for a very specific legal use case. And when I looked in the market, I was doing demos upon demos, but they were all contract management solutions. And these addressed a very different problem, right? They addressed the intricacies of what's inside a contract and not the actual intake and management of all these requests. So, I'd come home every single night complaining about this problem to my husband, who very luckily just happened to be a brilliant software engineer. And he was actually a product lead at the time at Google, working on Google Assistant. And we put our heads together and really identified this as what we coined the black box problem. So I'm just going to share one slide here because I just think it kind of illustrates the challenge, right, that we're facing with the black box problem. Now, everyone already kind of knows that business teams have this perception that legal is a black box, right? You send something through to your legal partners, you don't know when you're going to hear back. It could be 2 months, it could be 2 years for all they know. But our insight is that legal is also a black box in and to itself, as in legal leaders like myself didn't have visibility into everything that was coming in through the team. They didn't have visibility into key metrics. And so then they lean on this new category professionals, legal operations professionals, to kind of figure this out, but they don't have great tools either. So they're manually assembling reports, and often acting as human triage. So very, very inefficient system. And Julian and I called up, 30 folks in our network. We validated this. It was a huge problem with almost every single company that we talked to, about 30 to 40 companies. And so we're like, no one solved this yet. Let's put our heads together and solve this together. So that's how things got started.
Great. So what can you maybe peel the onion back a little bit more? So what kinds of, I take it this is really a workflow management type tool platform. What kinds of projects and tasks are you tracking and processing and managing? I take it you're a corporate lawyer, transaction lawyer by background originally, but presumably you're tracking all kinds of stuff beyond just contracts coming in, right? I mean, litigation, inquiries about compliance, or what are you tracking?
Exactly. Yep, you hit the nail on the head. What is best suited for this system are any high volume requests. So what we're finding when we're talking to companies is that most legal teams have multiple legal aliases. They'll start out with like a legal @ to just have like some semblance of collection, right, around generic questions, miscellaneous things, but then they start wanting to winnow it down into like maybe an equity @ or a transactions @ So all of that basically is a great proxy for a volume, right? It hits a certain volume. These channels or requests can come in very naturally to Streamline AI. We'll pull that in via email ingestion. But like you said, Howard, this is really meant to not just be a contracts only tool. It's meant to be a legal department and beyond tool. And all of our early customers, it's interesting, have identified 1 to 2 different business teams, even outside of legal, that are like, hey, this is a workflows tool. This is perfect for our use case too. We've got, HR ops implementing our tool, recruiting teams implementing our tool to streamline their processes as well. So it's a much larger opportunity than just legal.
Yeah, I think that my question is, why start with legal, right? I think this is it's a very tough change management exercise, as we all know, right? And then lawyers are not known for being digital forward. Like, why start there?
Yeah, so many different reasons. One is just native expertise. I know this problem inside and out, having lived and breathed it for almost a decade. And whenever we do demo to customers, in fact, someone just said this last week, you couldn't have designed a solution that better meets my needs. And if, maybe the only way is if you put electrodes in my brain and read exactly what was going on in my mind. Like, everyone sees that this truly was designed by a lawyer. And I think if we started implementing with an HR use case or a finance ops use case, we just wouldn't know it as intimately. And it's a perfect kind of entry point into companies, right? And then legal is also the hub because they work with every single team at the whole business, just like I did when I was at DoorDash. I handled contracts for every single team. And so it's very natural then for these other teams to get exposed, and you've got this land and expand opportunity. And then the last reason is because legal has been a tech laggard in the past, right? And so there's actually a dearth of really great tools. They're so hungry for it. And when we do demos, everyone loves, the UI is so simple to use. It's so intuitive. It looks so different from all the other tools that we have, so just from all these different angles, it was a good opportunity.
So 2 related questions then, Kathy. So first of all, how much tailoring is appropriate or needed for each customer. I mean, obviously customers do many different kinds of businesses. I mean, for our event, we're going to have a huge financial institution coming. There'll be, I think Meta is coming. We have a big accounting firm, a legal ops person coming. Presumably their needs for workflow management are going to be pretty different. So is your solution bespoke? Is it off the shelf? So that's kind of a general question. And then second of all, how deeply do you get into the actual each individual project? In other words, you're managing it, you're tracking it, but what do you do beyond just track and manage it for each project?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, a great one. We really do try to make it as frictionless as possible for companies to bring us in. And maybe it's easier if I just show you kind of one slide that breaks down the 3 key beats of our product. The first is the intake process itself. And the screen that you see here is actually our landing page. If you're going to submit a request inside the application itself, you click on the little boxes, it's all configurable so that you can build as many different forms as you want. Now, one very early and quick piece of feedback we got from customers as soon as we started going out in the market is, hey, business people aren't always going to want to go into your app. Even if you have SSO, even if you have a link on your wiki page, business people are always going to Slack you. They're going to send things, via email. And salespeople, they want to live and breathe in Salesforce. So one of the first things we did was built out integrations. Right? We have a very strong Salesforce integration so that salespeople can live and breathe in Salesforce and submit a request right there and never have to go into our app at all. So these are all the ways, Howard, that we're making it as easy as possible for companies to implement and bring our solution in. And so that we don't have to churn and do a ton of, change management, behavior change in order for the system to get adopted. Okay. And then the second is the tracking and the workflow automation. So the tracking, hub allows the legal team to have a single pane of glass where they see all the requests that they need to work on, all the different tickets, the statuses, and the related information. So this works for every single team, right? Every single team needs to have the central repository, this hub to work from. And then the last screen that you see is the metrics. That's the dashboard that we have that surfaces, key insights and key data around the workflows. So every single company that we implement with need all 3 components. And so a lot of the system is configurable, like the forms are configurable, and then the workflows, no code, very simple workflows that work based on plain English. Like if you can build an if-then statement around a workflow, then you can execute on it. And it basically puts the control in the hands of the customer. And what we're finding is most customers have to wait weeks, if not months, for their IT teams to make tweaks on their generic solutions, right? Like if they want to change the Jira flow, they have to go to engineering to do that. They don't need to do that with our solution. So in a way, it's tailored for how they work, but it's also off the shelf in terms of how we implement, which is really efficient. And then you asked how deep does the system actually go around the requests. So the intake forms are structured so that legal is collecting all the information they need right up front when they're about to work on something. And that's a big challenge that most legal teams face, as both of you right? You're getting things very piecemeal often. Then you have to go back 5 more times to ask follow-up information, and a ton of time is lost. So we actually surface all of that into the tracker page, so that legal can work on it right away and collaborate with the rest of the business as well.
So it sounds like a wonderful tool. Tell us how much traction you've achieved so far. I mean, you're new, right? I mean, you're fairly early. What have you been able to do so far in terms of customer adoption?
Yeah, so we currently have several $100,000 in ARR already. And we have real customers using the product. These are technology companies, all the way from small, like solo GCs, all the way to public companies. We actually have 2 public company customers that are using our product. And yeah, so it's a real traction, real dollars. It's been exciting.
And what about your team then? How big is your team? And can you tell us a little bit about your team?
Absolutely. Let me also just share a slide on our founders and introduce our wonderful founding team. So you already heard a little bit about me, but our CTO co-founder Julian really helped to mastermind, right, and build the product. He'd actually already been a co-founder of another startup before even Google. It was a social media and polling startup called Votable. And then he left that and joined Google as a software engineer. And there he worked on a machine learning based learning system. And then later on joined the team to product manage Google's conversational AI based Google Assistant product, which I think most of you know about, that little hub that sits on your kitchen table and you get to ask it questions about recipes. So Julian brings with him tremendous experience with ML and AI, as well as really deep insight into product. And once he and I basically had the product designed and built, we realized we needed to round out our team and actually get it into the hands of our customers. And so we needed a go-to-market expert. And we were so fortunate that one of our closest friends, someone we've known for about a decade, exactly fit the bill, and that's Ed Sheely. And Ed brings a tremendous background and track record of building successful go-to-market teams over the span of 20 years, including 3 companies that had successful exits. Yext went public, ShareFile got acquired by Citrix, and most recently AppBuddy got acquired by Validity. And so he built out go-to-market teams for all of those companies. And Howard, I always joke that my most successful pitch was actually convincing Ed to come out of retirement, because he was happily in Hawaii after he went through the AppBuddy acquisition. And so we had to convince him to emerge from retirement and move back to the Bay Area, which he did.
Yeah.
And so, oh, sorry, go ahead, David.
No, I mean, I just want to comment that I feel like you probably spent those years, and that was it, like looking at the picture of a team that would get funding, and just looks like that. So my compliments. One of the things that I think I really like about your team is how well you guys gel together when you talk. It's so obvious that you have great chemistry, and at this early stage, you're really investing in the team, right? And you have that really like hands-on firsthand experience as the CEO, which is again relatively rare, but I think that speaks to the status and like coming maturity of the market, that you now have people founding companies targeted at in-house departments and legal ops that are like legal ops senior operators themselves as CEOs. So I think that I think this is the first time I've seen that. I know, Howard, you probably look at more companies, but that caught my eye when I was looking at this company.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David.
By the way, back on the AI angle. So I'm just curious, how does using AI help your product be better than, say, existing rules-based or what other software products?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it really goes down to making the process as frictionless as possible for requesters to get their requests into the system, right? That's really where a system like this will live or die. And what we found is that, especially with email requests, they're all coming into the system in a very unstructured fashion, right? Because as much as we love to train our business partners, they're never going to, have perfectly listed out 10 bullet points and give you everything that you need. And so that's really where the AI comes in. And we're developing this over time. It's going to be one of our key moats. And today, what our system can do is identify and detect duplicate requests, and automatically eliminate those, identify who the business requester is. Even if an email has been forwarded 10 times, the system knows with a degree of certainty who the business requester is going to be. And then over time, what it's going to do is help to actually structure that data in a way that's the most helpful for the legal team, so that it'll map it back, for example, to the initial request form without manual data entry. And then my dream is for the system to learn the responses that legal is providing over time and get smarter and smarter, because today, almost all practitioners, in-house practitioners know, right, that they're wasting so much time answering the same questions again and again and again. What if a system could actually tell you, hey, this is how you answer this question 6 months ago, right? Or 4 months ago, and then just have it ready to go. And you just have to approve and send, because you don't really want to rely on a machine 100% to do, we're talking about very, very sensitive tasks, but that would save teams so much time if it was able to execute on that.
Cool. So, I mean, the function that your product serves seems to be pretty fundamental. And so what would you compare yourself to? I mean, even though you may be a lot better, I mean, what is out there today, and what did they do before you?
Yes, so the shorthand that we sometimes use to describe our product in one sentence is that we're Jira for legal, because most companies that we talk to are using these generic systems, right? They are trying to cobble together, Google Forms and spreadsheets, or maybe it's a Jira and an Asana board, or even a Monday.com. But almost all of them are telling us it totally feels like a square peg round hole. And many teams have said we've spent 6 months plus with almost a dedicated resource working with IT to try to tailor this for the way that the legal team works. And then 6 months later, they still throw up their hands and they say, it just doesn't work. It's just too clunky, or there's just too many gaps, and they go back to the drawing board. And so that's why we know there's a huge opportunity here.
So Kathy, we're running short on time, but we do have to cover a very important area, which is your capital formation situation. So tell us a little bit about what you've raised and what you're planning to do, and what your milestones you think are for further capital raises.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really fortunate. We very recently just closed on a $3 million round, seed round. It was led by Oceans Ventures, fantastic team located in New York. And we also have some Bay Area coverage as well, with Scribble Ventures, Ridge Ventures, and of course, Wilson Sonsini, all participating, along with a couple of other firms. And we were really lucky to be significantly oversubscribed with our fundraise, and even during this economic climate. So I think that was a very nice piece of validation that we received. And we're just deep in the stages of building out, the team. We're hired software engineers. We now have an AE to help to offset some of the load from Ed. And it's just all systems go. Yeah. Excellent.
So you're not currently in the market, but who knows where you'll be in a few months, right?
Always excited to talk to investors. So.
Right. Yes. All right. Excellent. David, what am I missing? Anything you want to add to this?
No, I think it's going to be a really interesting space. The question, I think, in my opinion, of who owns that in-house legal department from a tech perspective is still very much unsettled. So I think, the answer to date has primarily been CLM. I think my last question for you is, what's the relation to CLM? Because that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're finding is a couple of CLM are starting to dabble in intake, but they're approaching the problem philosophically from a very different angle, right? Because CLM naturally, all of their energy and functionalities devoted to getting into the weeds of the document itself, the redlining capabilities, the clause libraries. We're never going to want to replicate that. That takes a ton of engineering resources and focus away from what we want to build. And so what we're focused on is actually truly the intake and the workflows, right? How to make teams communicate and work better, and then helping a request zip through the system. So it's very complementary in that regard. And almost all of our existing customers already have CLM, which proves that, right? They see need for intake separately from CLM. It's not being addressed by CLM, and we're actually integrating. It's one of our next big integrations that's going to roll out. So we'll play side by side, but there's absolutely a Venn diagram, David. There's going to be a little bit of overlap, no question. But we're not trying to replicate what CLM is doing and carving out a new space for ourselves.
Well, excellent. Well, we're going to want to save some of your energy and content for Bonnie Doon, Kathy. We'll look forward to having you there. Thank you so much for giving us this presentation today, but look forward to seeing you in the mountains.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to seeing you in person as well.
And thank you, David, as well, for coming today.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.